A train crossed a mountain pass last year, and every single passenger pulled their blind down before it happened. Nobody gave the order. No conductor walked the aisle asking. They just did it, together, in silence, like they'd rehearsed it 100 times before. A woman was riding that train. Her name here is Claire. Not the one she was born with, but everything else in this story is exactly how she says it happened, pieced together over years from people who'd rather not talk about it at all. The track she was riding cut through a stretch of mountain so thick with pine that even at noon, the light barely reaches the rails. A depot used to sit out there, small, a wooden platform, a single office, a water tower that stopped working decades ago. For almost 40 years, that depot sat boarded shut. It only reopened recently, out of plain necessity. And even now, trains don't stop there after dark, not officially. And by the way the crews talk about it, not unofficially either. Claire's family passed through that stretch a few times a year, visiting relatives further up the mountain. She was 7 the first time she understood something was wrong with it. The ride had already gone bad before it started, hour after hour of delays, until by the final stretch, night had swallowed the windows whole. Claire was wandering the aisle when a man a few rows up said it, loud enough for half the car to hear. "We're coming up on the old depot. Close the blinds." She turned to ask her mother why. Her mother told her to hush. Claire kept quiet for about 5 minutes, and in that time, the entire car went dead silent. The train itself seemed to pick up speed, like it wanted to be through that stretch as fast as it possibly could. Then it passed. Claire turned instead to the man across the aisle. Older, weathered, a lifetime spent on the railroad written into his face. "She still walks it," was all he'd say. "Been that way since '61. Ask your grandmother. She'll know more than I'm willing to say on a train." That was the whole answer Claire got that night. It wasn't until they reached her grandmother's house, and Claire refused to drop the question, that the rest came out, pulled together from what her grandmother remembered, and from a folded newspaper clipping kept in a drawer, yellowed at the edges, that had never once been thrown away. Back in the early 1960s, that stretch of railroad wasn't quiet at all. A depot had just gone up to serve the logging and mining crews further into the hills, and for a place with almost no other way in or out, that little station meant everything. One night, a train came through late. A young woman stepped off, no older than 35, in a plain white dress gone gray at the hem. She was alone, no one waiting for her, just a cloth bag, worn thin at the seams, and the hollowed-out look of someone who hadn't eaten properly in days. The clipping said little more than that she'd come hoping to find work, the mill maybe, or one of the seasonal canning operations. Whatever she was hoping for, she never got the chance. The depot office sat a fair distance from the platform. Rather than walk the long way around, she cut across the tracks. The light barely reached past the ticket window. Out where she was walking, there was only shadow. She stumbled, fell across the rails, and in the dark, exhausted, alone, she didn't get back up in time. A freight train came through on its regular route not long after. By morning, there wasn't enough left to identify her. No name in her bag, no papers. Nobody claimed her. Nobody came looking. The case closed in 3 short paragraphs. One more accident on the tracks. Within a few weeks, she'd been forgotten by nearly everyone. They had no idea what was coming. The first sign wasn't a ghost. It was a lantern. Tom, who ran the coffee stand near the platform, noticed it first. A small orange light out past the far tracks, low to the ground, moving where no lantern should have been at that hour. He mentioned it to the crew the next morning. Nobody had been out there. Nobody owned a lantern that color. A few nights later, the telegraph operator started picking up interference on the wire right around the same time each evening. Nothing anyone could explain. And in the mornings, one of the maintenance men began finding footprints on the platform. Small, bare, leading from the ticket window straight out onto the tracks. And stopping, just stopping. No footprints leading back. The crew joked about it, the way people do when they don't want to say what they're actually thinking. The joke stopped the night one of the freight men saw something cross the tracks at a dead run. Low, fast, gone before he could get a proper look. He never walked that stretch alone after dark again. Word reached Walter, the depot manager, through half a dozen mouths before he ever saw anything himself. Tired men saw strange things at the end of long shifts. That was all it was, he told himself. Then his crew started finding tools turning up days later in places no one had left them. Then a signal failure stranded a train on the line for 6 hours with no mechanical cause anyone could find. Then 2 of his best men quit in the same week, and neither would say why beyond, "I don't like it out there anymore." Walter decided to see for himself. He stayed late one night, alone in his office, telling himself he'd catch whatever prankster was behind it. Around midnight, the temperature in the room dropped hard enough that he could see his own breath. He looked up. Through the gap along the door frame, out past the reach of the platform light, stood a woman in a long white dress. Her hair hung loose and tangled across her face. Dark stains soaked into fabric that had no business holding stains at all. She was walking, slow, deliberate. Her steps landed wrong, off rhythm, in a way that turned his stomach before his mind worked out why. Then she stopped and turned toward his office. Walter didn't wait to find out what came next. He locked the door, sat frozen as, a few seconds later, something knocked. He didn't answer. The knock came again. Then silence. Then footsteps retreating into the dark. When he got home, his wife Margaret knew something was wrong before he said a word. He told her everything. The lantern, the footprints, the failed signal, and now this. For the first time, she didn't tell him he was working too hard. She'd heard the same stories from the other wives for weeks. She'd just been hoping none of it was true. Walter didn't wait for it to get worse. Through some of the older workers, he heard about a retired investigator, once affiliated with a local parish. People called him Father Ellis. Ellis came out within the week, walked the tracks in daylight, asked a handful of questions. His answer sounded reasonable enough. A woman had died badly out here, forgotten and unclaimed, and the restless dead sometimes just wanted to be acknowledged. He suggested something simple, a small marker near where she'd fallen. Her death finally noted somewhere. A quiet way of saying she hadn't gone completely unseen. Walter had it placed within days. For a short while, it worked. No lantern, no footprints. Walter let himself believe, carefully, that it was over. It wasn't. The marker didn't calm her. It woke her up further, as if being remembered, after everything, only reminded her how long no one had bothered. One evening, a freight shipment was expected at dusk. Walter, Margaret, and a handful of workers stood near the platform when they heard the whistle in the distance, and every one of them went still. Running alongside the tracks, matching the train car for car, was the woman in white, gliding at an unnatural speed, tangled hair whipping behind her, keeping perfect pace with the freight cars as they thundered past. "Everybody in my office, now!" They bolted the door and sat in silence as the train roared past outside. When it cleared, Walter looked through the keyhole. She was standing right outside, circling the building slowly, like she was deciding something. They stayed crammed in that office until she vanished near dawn. Margaret had heard enough. The marker hadn't worked. Whatever this was, it was getting worse, not better. Walter agreed. He called Ellis that same night. This time, Ellis didn't offer a quick answer. He went digging. County records, the old coroner's file, a newspaper morgue in the nearest town with an archive worth searching. What he found took 3 days. There'd been an inquest, brief and half-hearted, noting that the platform lighting had been inadequate for over a year before her death. A complaint filed twice by depot staff and ignored twice by the company. There'd been no funeral, no notice posted, no real attempt to trace who she was beyond a single afternoon of asking around. The file was thin in a way that felt less like an accident and more like nobody had cared enough to make it thick. She wasn't just failed once, Ellis told Walter and Margaret, laying the papers between them. She was failed by everyone who could have helped her before that night and after it. The marker wasn't enough, because a marker isn't the same as being sorry. She needs someone to actually reckon with what happened to her, not just note it and walk away. He proposed a vigil, sit with her, let her show them what she needed. Margaret didn't like it. Walter, still holding on to the job and the life they'd built around it, wanted to try. They sat near the platform after dark, Ellis speaking softly into the silence, inviting whatever was out there to answer him. The temperature dropped sharply, and there she was, closer than she had ever let anyone get. She didn't speak in full sentences, just fragments, cold and hollow, half swallowed by static on Ellis's recorder that none of them could make sense of until later. No one came, lay there, not one. Words dropped like stones, more feeling than language. Ellis kept his voice steady. "We know what happened to you now. We read what they wouldn't fix, what they should have done and didn't. We're not the ones who failed you, but we see it. We're not looking away." For a moment, something in her seemed to still. Then it broke. Whatever calm had almost held gave way to something closer to rage, as if the sight of people finally listening only sharpened how long she'd gone without it. She lunged, gripping Ellis by the throat with a strength that shouldn't have belonged to anything human. Walter shouted for her to stop. She threw him into the depot wall and turned on him instead. It was Margaret who noticed it, in the scramble. Beneath the hem of that faded dress, the woman's feet were turned unnaturally backward. Ellis forced himself upright and flung a handful of blessed salt at her, a prayer breaking under his breath. She screamed and staggered back. He struck again and again, until, in a final burst of light and cold wind, she was gone. "That's not resolution," Ellis said, breathing hard. "That's her retreating to gather herself. I don't think this is over. I think it's just beginning to actually feel what's owed to it. The days after weren't quiet. Small things kept happening. A cold patch that lingered in the office long after the door was shut. A faint tapping on the window some nights that never repeated in the same rhythm twice. The depot dog refusing, flatly, to cross past the old marker at all. Nothing large enough to act on. Just enough to keep Margaret from ever fully sleeping. On the 15th night, it stopped being small. A knock came at their door well past midnight, and the voice that answered Walter's call was hers, closer than it had ever sounded. You were shown what happened to me, and you're still standing where they let it happen. Margaret grabbed the phone before Walter could stop her, dialing Ellis with hands that wouldn't hold still. He answered already half-dressed, already reaching for his coat before she'd finished the sentence, telling her to hold on, to keep the door barred, that he was coming. He wasn't fast enough. The pounding started before he'd even reached the mountain road, violent, relentless. By the time his car came around the last bend and he saw the lights of the company house still burning, the door had already given way. What happened inside, he never fully described to anyone outside the investigation. Only that he was 3 minutes too late. And that 3 minutes was the only number that ever seemed to matter to him again. The deaths were investigated. No real evidence was ever found, and the case closed the way the young woman's had closed years before it. Unresolved, filed away. Half the remaining crew quit within the month. Trains that used to stop there began skipping the depot entirely, picking up speed as they approached and slowing again, only once well clear. Passengers took to keeping their blinds shut and staying quiet as their trains rolled through. The same ritual Claire would witness decades later, not yet understanding why every adult around her had gone so still. The company shut the depot down. It stayed that way for almost 40 years. It only reopened recently, mostly out of local necessity. The marker is still out there, half swallowed by weeds now. Nobody quite willing to remove it or tend it either. But even now, trains don't stop there after dark. People who notice these things say there's still something lingering out there among the trees and the old rails. Nothing that's caused any confirmed harm in recent years. Nothing anyone's eager to test, either. Claire still thinks about that trip sometimes. The silence in that train car. Her grandmother's hands smoothing out that old clipping on the kitchen table. Careful, like it might tear if she wasn't gentle enough with it. She still doesn't know exactly what to believe, but she remembers the look on every adult's face that night. And it wasn't the look of people humoring an old legend. It was the look of people who knew exactly how far a closed blind could keep them from being seen.